Welcome to Ugly Oysters. This video is one of a series of discussions based on Jordan Peterson's book, Beyond Order. Today we look at Peterson's chapter called, Be Grateful in Spite of Your Suffering. Is it possible that love and hope are only ever understood in the light of suffering and evil? I have posted timestamps below if you wish to locate anything specific, and I do hope you enjoy the view. Morning.
Morning.
How are you?
Not bad.
Okay, good. It's a beautiful fall morning, isn't it?
I don't know yet.
Oh, I see.
Haven't go out and haven't looked out of the window yet.
It's cloudy and cool. Feels like October, actually. This is September.
Not raining?
Not raining now, no.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So, all ready to dive into the final chapter of Peterson.
Yeah.
Do you have any...
Not bad, huh?
Yeah, not bad. So, how about we have a look at it then? It's Rule
Sure.
12.
Sure.
In total now for Peterson, 24 rules, if you take both books.
So every month too.
Yeah, every month too.
Mm.
So this one is called Be Grateful in Spite of Your Suffering. It seems to be a simpler chapter.
Mm-hmm.
It just has 3 sections. One is called Down Can Define Up. The other is called The Mephistophelian Spirit. And the last section is called Courage, but Subordinate Love. So I like how he starts his chapter. He begins with a sentence. He says, I have been searching for decades for certainty. I think that's a captivating line. And it's compelling. I mean, there's something there that you can recognize. I certainly remember my own years of seeking certainty. That it always seemed like, especially with modernity, it always seemed like there was a counterbalance to everything else. Like, one person has one opinion, another person has another opinion, and you could never really get down to the hard rock of reality. So I also like, in that statement, he's implying how difficult it is to be certain. Like, if a person, goes through their whole life thinking, I know what's what, and they never really question their own reality, or they never allow themselves to listen to the views of others, then I think they haven't adequately encountered the real world. Because there's always going to be somebody who has a view opposite of the one that you hold, and they have reasons why they have those views. So I really like that statement. But then he says he thinks he has found certainty in one area, anyway, maybe more, but one area. He says he regards suffering and the exaggeration of that suffering by malevolence or evil. He doesn't use the word evil a lot. He uses malevolence instead.
Yeah. And benevolence.
And benevolence. Malevolence and benevolence. Yeah, right.
You like use these 2 words to be the opposite.
Yeah, interesting. I've used benevolence, but generally not malevolence. Anyway, I think he's trying to avoid sounding like an old-time preacher, so he doesn't use the word evil.
Maybe, because evil is very prevailed in church.
Yeah, it just has that Bible thumping sound.
Yeah, have a religious jar, and he don't want to be like that.
Yeah. So, but he's also a professor, so he has to use the sophisticated language. But so he says, I regard the inevitability of suffering and its exaggeration by malevolence as unshakable existential truths. I believe even more deeply. I'm just reading from his words on page 355. I believe even more deeply that people have the ability to transcend their suffering, psychologically and practically, and to constrain or hold back their own malevolence, as well as the evils that characterize the social and natural worlds. Yeah, so this is sort of the essential section of his chapter, right at the introduction. And also, I think, basically, this is the message you'll find in religion. In Christianity, suffering is inevitable. Evil is inevitable. In Buddhism, suffering is inevitable. And yeah, I mean, frankly, I have no difficulty with that starting point. But it is interesting. On this channel, I will soon be posting a chapter that's quite a bit different. It's like audiobook of I wouldn't call it a novel, but an audiobook that I am writing. And in the very first section, there's an event where the narrator is sitting in his car, and two lovers pass by. And just as the narrator is appreciating the dynamic of their love to one another, those two people both turn and look at the narrator at the same time. And it's based on a real-life experience that I had, where that actually occurred. And it means, like, they didn't speak to one another. Let's both turn and look at the guy behind us who's watching us. But they basically somehow knew I was there and felt my presence, and I guess they felt my appreciation of the warmth they shared. I also believe, in the writing, I called that an existential certainty. I also believe that love is an existential certainty, as much as evil is. It's just, it's harder to demonstrate. I think when the section that Peterson's talking about, he calls it down can define up. He says it's often hard to demonstrate or prove, I don't know if he says this, I'm saying this, it's often harder to demonstrate or prove goodness in life. But it's quite the opposite. It's less difficult to prove the negative. People tend to agree if you say, okay, well, that's evil, or that's suffering, or that's ugly. Therefore, what is the good? The good should be the opposite of that. So he says down can define what up is.
Yeah. Like if there is no night, how can be light?
Yeah, right. Yeah, and so that's what he's saying, is if you want to find certainty, look for the evil, and that'll help you to define the negative side, and then based on the negative, based on the down, you can define what the good is. You can figure out what, because good, I mean, obviously evil is not what you want. You want the good thing. And then he also says in that section, the way that you then face that evil and suffering is the way that you will determine your quality of life. If a person is noble and confronts their suffering and the evil that they experience and produce, and attempt to reduce the suffering and the evil that they produce, then there are some good results that can happen. One is, if you determine that you want to resist evil, already you have a psychological purpose. And psychological purpose can be very empowering and can reduce suffering. Just that alone, just the determination to reduce suffering can reduce suffering. But then you can actually practically reduce your own suffering and the suffering of others. That's number 2. 1 is psychological, 2 is practical. 3 is you can prevent your own evil. You can prevent yourself from being a destructive force. And then 4 is you can acquire, as a result, courage and gratitude. And in this sense, courage and gratitude are kind of like gifts. It's something nice to have, is to have courage, and it's nice to have gratitude in your life. So that's the first section. Did you have any thoughts on that before we went on?
I just I remember one sentence.
Yeah.
Searching hope from despair, and your life will be magnificent. Is this a sentence like when we are young, like the adults try to encourage us? Because despair and hope in Chinese pronunciation is very similar. Despair is 绝望, and hope is 希望. So you see, there is all this 望 there. What's 望 mean? It means perspective, looking, So either you have this 绝, like a dead looking, like a dead perspective, like there is no hope, despair. Or you have this 希望, that's full of hope, So it's, and I love this sentence very long ago, because I felt it's, first of all, it's like a poem. And the second, it's really like conveying some positive, like strength there, while you really struggling. So I felt like basically what Peterson talking about in this chapter also is kind of the thing. Yeah. Like you met malevolence, then you're gonna find benevolence.
Yeah.
Like yeah, and if you don't have 绝望, despair, how you will have the desire, try to seek the hope, 希望? Because you never know how hurt that is. I mean, so lots of the thing, maybe it's just tangled together, darkness and lightness. So maybe just like when you grow up, like finally, you're gonna accept the dirt and the flower live together. But right. Before you, maybe not, especially kids. They were not. They want absolutely light.
Yeah.
They want absolutely candy, sweet.
Yeah.
So this made me thinking about some religious people or some religious and how to say group. I felt all the life like trying to using God as their banner, kind of use all their life and strength to cut down the despair, like not allow despair happen, and declare that not belong to God. Declare that it's kind of not life.
Yeah.
Kind of they thought have the God banner. They will never meet this malevolence. But
Yeah.
actually, no, maybe you meet more. Because
Yeah.
now you have God's banner. So maybe life will give you more tests or more trial. So I felt then they kind of felt desperate, can't avoid,
Yeah.
And I think that's the time their faith gonna go up another level. But some people maybe just failed because they can't accept.
Yeah.
So anyway, so this is the something I feel.
Yeah. So that comes from your culture.
Yeah, I think so. It's kind of we will say dead quickly is not good as live hardly.
That's so gritty, like very,
Greedy.
very earthy kind of saying. Do you know?
Yeah, yeah,
Do you know if that
yeah.
came out of like that's not a Chairman Mao saying or something like that, is it?
No, it's from very, very old time.
I see. I
Before
see.
President Mao was born.
I see. So that's really in the spirit of the culture then.
I think basically, though China has a very large map, that how to say, like a continent or something, but most of the place you can't live. It's not very like a good land
Mm,
to
I see.
produce food, right?
Yeah.
So I think struggling to live is always uh, the challenge of what people face.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because basically they need to find food to live, and they need like plant the food,
Yeah.
But not land. Actually, you can't plant food at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think this is always being with them.
Yeah. Yeah. There is
Not
one.
as a, like a beautiful like a land like Canada, like so many. You just plant stuff and grow. No, like in China, lots of places you plant, not grow, and then it's so dry. There is no water. Like whatever, like it's so hard. I saw some movie and documentary, and I even never noticed, because I born in this like land which is a plain, flat. It's not like all the mountains.
Mm,
So they need like cut the mountains, the stone out of the mountain to plant the food for them. It's so hard. Even just this is already so hard.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So Chinese know a lot about the meaning of suffering to live.
yeah, I think so. That's why all of these idioms will be invented
Right.
to encourage themselves to sustain.
And there is a belief, kind of premise that geography produces culture. Like that's one of the shaping influences where you live.
Uh,
And I think it's true. Like the tropical islands, those cultures are always so laid back. Basically, they catch fish and eat fruit. And,
uh-huh.
it's not a struggle to survive. And, yeah, those are that's another extreme example where you find that.
Yeah.
And sort of a free and easy lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so good. So that's the two words despair and hope, finding hope in despair in a
Mm-hmm.
Chinese idiom, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so that relates to what Peterson's saying down can define up.
Mm-hmm.
The second section is the Mephistophelian spirit. And this is where Peterson says, and I think this section, in a way, just restates the previous section, but he does it in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
He says there's a tendency in all of us that works against our own best interests.
Mm-hmm.
And he even says that it comes out in our motives, our systems of belief, but it even can take on the appearance of being a kind of personality.
Mm-hmm.
So he calls it a spirit. But when he describes it this way, he's, basically what he's identifying is probably what people say, like, I don't know what happened. I just felt like I was possessed, or there was some
Mm-hmm.
spirit, or, um,
Mm-hmm.
because he thinks it's in us, and it's in us in such a way that it can be organized and perceived or understood in our experience as another personality, something that's working against us. And
Mm-hmm.
he claims that it comes from a basic dissatisfaction with
Mm-hmm.
life. So
Mm-hmm.
if life or suffering gets so bad, and it can even get formalized into a kind of philosophy. Like he met somebody who took a philosophical position that if life is the way it's going to be, then there shouldn't really be any good reason to have children. Like, why would you bring children into this world? And I can't find who that person. Oh, Slavoj Zizek, kind of a funny name. Oh, and also David Benatar.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they basically said, you shouldn't have children. We should all just stop having children until humanity doesn't exist anymore because life is so terrible.
Mm-hmm.
And he says that is basically the doctrine of the evil spirit.
Mm-hmm.
That life is not worth living.
Mm-hmm.
And like you can see that kind of in a child, like my son,
Mm-hmm.
when he gets so frustrated with his Lego, instead of backing up and trying to think, how can I make this better, just throwing it against a wall and smashing it, just so angry with it.
Mm-hmm.
And Peterson addresses this in a very sympathetic way. Like, he's not pointing his finger and saying these people who have these ideas or
Mm-hmm.
this spirit that can rise up in people.
Mm-hmm.
He's not saying it's so terrible, it's so bad of these people to be this way. No, he's quite sympathetic to it, and he uses the story of Jesus on the cross,
Mm-hmm.
where at the peak of Jesus' suffering, he
Mm-hmm.
says, "Why have you forsaken me, God?"
Mm-hmm.
And it appears to imply, according to Peterson, that the burden of life can become so great that even God himself, who Jesus was, can lose faith in God, can lose
Mm-hmm.
faith in life, basically. Can just think that life is too terrible. And Peterson makes the statement that it's hard to imagine a story that is more sympathetic to human beings than this story. God himself gives up on life. So, a person getting into that state where they want to give up on life, where they think life is so terrible, Peterson says it's understandable. Life can be very terrible. But then he goes on to say, so if this is the evil, if this is the bad, then good should be its opposite. And that evil can call out the nobility of people. And fighting evil, Peterson thinks, is basically more hopeful than giving up. And I've kind of always believed this too. There's always discussion about what the unpardonable sin is in the Bible. They talk about one sin that there's no forgiveness for. And I think that sin is the sin of giving up. Because if you give up, then what hope is there anymore? That one you can't recover from. Unless you give up giving up, then you're back into hopefulness. But if a person gives up, there is no more hope. There is no more beauty. There is no more chance. It's already done. You've given up. What can you do?
That's why I've heard people say suicide. If you suicide, you can't go to heaven.
Yeah, I think people think that way because of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so he says, fighting evil is more hopeful, and along with that, a spirit of gratitude gives you the courage to fight the evil. In other words, find the things in life that you can be grateful for, because basically the other teaching of the Bible is that where sin abounds, where there's lots of sin, grace abounds even more. There's even more goodness in that darkest place. And so to try to find that and be grateful for it and be thankful for it, that will give strength to courage, which is required when you're facing suffering. You have to have courage to work to reduce it and to reduce evil. So that's the second section, the Mephistophelian spirit. Did you have anything stand out for you in that section?
I just like I said, the people suicide, they can't go to heaven. That means they just basically they give up the life, they give up what they own. I also remember in Jesus' story, there was this master gave every servant some money to go ahead, but someone buried it.
Yeah.
And the master is not happy. So if gave you this life and you didn't use it and you just give it up, it's kind of to the master, it's kind of a waste of giving you this money. So that's not appreciated by the master. So because I always have difficulty to understand about the suicide issue. I think if someone's suicide, that's their life. They have the right to treat it. But now I thought, seems no, even our life have this divine aspect, which is a gift. It's being given by God. So you can view it as this story, the master gave you the money, and it's a gift, and you actually by burying it, you didn't respect the gift and you didn't appreciate the gift. That's the not loving and not respect the master.
Yeah.
Let's say God issue. So that's why they will say finally you can't go to heaven, because you can't connect it with God by respect and by appreciate.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I just have that.
Yeah. That's good. I think so. Okay. So the last section is called Courage but Subordinate Love. And I think in this section, he just basically says, in order to function properly in this life, we all need to seek the good, even though we often feel abandoned by God. Despite it all, we need to love, we need to have courage, we need to be thankful. And start by making things better for ourselves, make things better for our families, make things better for the community. It's kind of, you drop the rock in the pond and the waves spread out. I think that's his thinking. So that's his chapter, and there's a few things that stand out in the chapter to me. I've already mentioned the first one, which is I agree with him that suffering is essential, but I also think that love is also an existential reality. I think I just think it's an interesting sentence that he makes when he talks about the Mephistophelian spirit. When you recognize something in yourself, and I recognize in myself, there are things that sometimes push me to make decisions that are self-destructive. And it's a kind of a tendency I know that I have. And then he makes the sentence, if you're not in control of yourself, who or what is? It's just a compelling, thought-provoking sentence. And then the follow-up on the next page is, we might ask ourselves, why would such a spirit exist? Why would it be a part of each of us? Like, why is there this self-destructive tendency? And the other thing is, I'm going to say that in the last chapter, I complained about Peterson's moralism. Too moralistic. But here I don't feel this way.
So desired to be right.
Pardon me?
He is so desired to be right.
Yeah, but because it's moralistic,
kind of like a walking on the ice,
Yeah.
Very cautious, afraid like he may do something wrong.
Yeah. Well,
I admire that, actually. I think it's intellectual cautious.
Yeah. Well,
he has intellectual honesty and intellectual cautious.
Yeah.
Which I really admire.
Yeah. Well, I made my argument the last time, and I don't remember what it was. All I'm saying is, on the last video, I didn't like his moralism. But this chapter, I feel he's not being moralistic. I feel he's being more of the storytelling style. And then when he does that, I can swallow everything he's saying, It's it's just the last chapter, too rational for me, too judgy in a way. What else? I also mentioned the story of Jesus on the cross being very sympathetic. I like the way he creates that tendency in ourselves, that self-destructive tendency. I like the way he gives it a sort of personality. See, that's another thing that for me becomes relatable and understandable much more than moralism. The last thing I wanted to pardon me?
No, it's okay.
The last thing I wanted to comment on is he talks about grief. And that also can be something, that's also a down that can define up. When you have this deep sadness about something, and it's so deep that it's in you physically. I'm always very curious about things like laughter, which just kind of pops out of your body and you don't even know why. Or you see something or hear something and it makes you nauseous. You want to vomit, And there's no reason why seeing something should make you have that feeling, but your body just reacts. Well, grief is like that. It's like your body just takes charge. Even you don't want it to, it will happen. And he talks about how it can hit you like a wave. And when that happens, you know that something deeply is affecting you. And he says grief must be a reflection of love. It's probably the deepest proof of love. It's an expression from your body that whatever you've lost has something deep and meaningful to you personally, and so it can help define what love is. And I can only think of maybe 2 or 3 times in my life where I've ever felt that way. One time, I knew someone many years ago and was very deeply connected to this person. And when that person left, everything brought me pain. All the places that we used to go to brought me pain. My body just ached. And I had never felt that before. And I think that defined for me something of the impact of that person on my life. There was one other occasion, and that was I had been married for many years and had no children, and then remarried, and my wife got pregnant, and I was shocked, and I thought I wasn't ever going to have children, and so that seemed all right. And then she had a miscarriage, and did I ever feel sad? Whoa. And when I felt that sadness, when I felt that grief, suddenly I realized, oh, so I really want to have children. I didn't know that until then. So those are 2 examples where down defines up. Down, the badness shows me what the goodness was.
Let me remind of in France, the Rachel seems got pregnant, and but not sure. So then her friend Phoebe tried to test her. So let's retest. Then after that, Rachel say, "What's it? The result?" Phoebe say, "You're not." Then Rachel suddenly cry. Say, "Oh." Then Phoebe say, "Oh yeah, you are." Because before Rachel's worry and don't want a kid because she hasn't got married yet, and difficult finance issue, everything overwhelmed her. So she think definitely she will not want the kids come. But then after Phoebe's playing with her, she just feel the real feeling. So at that time, Phoebe said, "Now you know what your real feeling is."
Yeah, right.
Yes,
right. Yeah, knowing your own feeling is a tricky thing, I think. And so in a sense, grief can really help to clarify that feeling. The only problem is, grief is provoked by a tragic end to something, usually. But the good, positive end of the story for me is that another child came along, and I was able to overcome the grief of the lost first one. So that's all I have for this chapter. I think that's pretty much it. Did you have anything else about this?
I have one thing there.
Yeah.
Just now. But I forget now.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, just now I want to say something, and I say you go ahead.
Yeah,
Then I'm gonna remember later. Then I forget.
I see. Well,
Mm.
we got to work on our procedures then, but never mind. Um, so, okay. Then anything you wonder about or any kind of action that you feel compelled by because of this chapter, or any Chinese views that you think have relevance with this section?
I basically felt like every kind of emotion, every kind of suffering, whatever this a negative or positive, it doesn't matter. It's just a one part of the life. Um, for example, I think communist, this utopian, this ideology, they only want half of the life, which is good. But this kind of a pursuing actually make them not live in the reality. So it's above the reality. So then they can't seize with the reality closely. So because just when you are talking about all of these things, I just realized for example, like my parents, I think they are actually very, and childish, like
Yeah.
they don't want to accept the suffering. They avoiding the suffering, but they're lucky, they're born in around the new China building up, and they didn't suffer a lot from all of the activities happen in China, and they grow to be old, and they can have their kind of a childish world view of the world, like a black and white view, like a very simple view. But later on, you see this world has become more and more complex. I don't think someone can have their whole life this way,
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just unavoidable.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you mentioned also religion. I think religion can be that way too. Very puritanical. All light and no darkness. I
Yeah,
know
that's why we attract people.
I know one of my favorite Christian writers, her name is Madeleine L'Engle. She wrote a poem and I searched for it all over the internet. I can't find it. So I think when she read it to the class, because I was listening to some classes she taught, she may have only shared it, like it might have been in her personal collection, but never published. But I still remember the beginning lines. There's too much light. It's too bright for our infirm delight. Like she tried to express how hard and burning light can be, and that it's not suitable for human living to be so basically clean and bright. There has to be some darkness there. It's kind of a different angle on it. It's almost like she's pleading to, turn down the lights, So in a way, she's more welcoming of the shadows and the unclarities of life.
Like Peterson himself said, the shadow is this feminism chaos.
Yeah.
So you can produce things. And I think, oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Like a woman pregnant, actually from in this I think dark place. The kids is like in the womb or something. It's all like a kind of a chaotic situation, like a environment for a kid to grow up there.
Okay, so what would you title this chapter? And what score would you give it?
Mm, this chapter, I would just say, accept your cards.
Accept your cards.
Like
Okay.
whatever cards you are being shifted to,
Uh-huh.
and you just accepted it.
Yeah. Okay. Accept the cards that are dealt to you.
And the skull is a 6, maybe.
Oh, I see. A little bit lower. Interesting.
Yeah.
I gave it an 8. And I think the title I will give it is Hope from Despair. I like that, what you described.
Okay.
Yeah,
Copyright.
yeah. Down can define up. Hope from despair.
Okay.
Okay, so that's it. I think maybe if we have opportunity, we'll do one more video where we just talk about the book in general. Just
Sure.
everything as a kind of after the fact. What do we think about it and what do we feel about it? But that's for
Sure.
another day.
Okay.
Okay, so thank you.
Thank you.
We'll see you later.
See you.
Have a good day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
That's it for today. Come back and check out some of our other videos. Please put your comments below, hit like and subscribe with notifications if you wish to join in conversations with us on other topics.